AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host Mark Kelly brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
Welcome to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kelly. Today's guest is Carsten Ullrich. Carsten is the Director of Artificial Intelligence at Centogene. Very welcome to the show, Carsten.
Yeah, hi Mark. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So Carsten, before we get into some of the great work that you're doing at Centogene, tell me a little bit about your background and your experience to date.
Okay, yeah. So my background actually is AI. So I've been in AI for more than 20 years now. I've been in AI before it has become so popular again. So I grew up with this good old-fashioned AI, and of course I'm really happy to see this renaissance or even revolution of the field in the last years. And I studied in Germany in a small university next to France. I had the good luck to have my professor being one of the founding fathers of the AI in Germany. And I worked at the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, one of the largest research centers focusing on applying artificial intelligence. So from the very beginning on, I've been looking at how to use AI for the purpose of helping the human, for helping students learn better. So we built a web-based adaptive learning environment that would compile books according to your knowledge and according to your learning goals. So that was a great start with AI, really looking at AI, how it can simplify the learning. And then I went to China for a few years because I realized if you want to look at what technology looks like in the future, you have to be in China. So I was once in Shanghai, and there I really realized, no, that's the future. So I stayed 7 years in China, looking again at technology-enhanced learning and education. So the Shanghai Jiao Tong University, where I was, they had 2 satellites that were live streaming the lectures from the classrooms to Tibet and Western China. And years before the iPhone, when we still had these Nokia phones that you would open with this nice click, as you can see in the movies. At this time already, they had live streams on the mobile phones. So it was so impressive, and it was really feeling great to be part of that, really bringing technology into application, helping people learn. And then I came back to Germany, back to the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, and I was continuing there, looking again how to use AI, Industry 4.0, not for helping students learn, but for helping workers better, how to help them improving their work processes, learning processes, how to use all the sensor information that's in these modern industrial production lines so that the worker could be supported with whatever information he would need it just in time. And then 1 year ago, I switched to industry, to Centogene, where again, I'm looking at how to apply AI, and now in a really very, very interesting and really a great field, namely life science, rare diseases, to improve diagnostic for rare diseases, to make new discoveries, new genes, new pathways in rare diseases. And what makes me so happy is this is really a field where AI really makes sense. Now you have this massive amount of data, you have long processes where every speed up would help. So perfect environment for AI.
Carsten, thank you very much for that overview. Can you tell us a little bit about how AI can be used for rare diseases, and what are the challenges and opportunities that come about from this?
Rare diseases, well, it's called rare disease because only very few people have these diseases, so less than 1 person in 2,000. And that actually means that physicians, doctors, they don't have much experience with that. And this means in practice that to get the correct diagnosis, if you suffer from a rare disease, it takes 8 years in average. So 8 years that you go from doctor to doctor and try to to find out what's wrong with you or what's wrong with your child. So everything that can speed up or improve diagnosis, this really has a direct, immediate benefit. And this was also the reason why Centogene was founded. Our founder, Professor Androlfs, he was sitting at the beach here near Rostock, where our headquarters is, reading a newspaper about Gaucher, one of these rare diseases, where the symptoms were described. And the next day, so he was a practicing doctor, the next day he had a patient who really matched these symptoms. And this guy really was like 9 years looking for the correct diagnosis. So this was the motivation upon which Centogene was built. And this is what we strive for at Centogene, improving, speeding up diagnosis of rare diseases. And we do that by genetic testing. So physicians all over the world send us filter cards. So these are little like postcards where you put in blood drops and they get processed here in Rostock. We do the genetic analysis and try to identify what mutations, what variants are there that might explain the symptoms the people are having. And every person, if you take my genome and your genome, there will be at least 2 million differences. And this is way too much for a person to go through. You cannot go through 2 million different genetic differences and find out which one is now the relevant. So there again, already AI is applied to sort out those that probably don't have an effect, so that it can get condensed to like 20, on which then our medical expert look at and compared with the symptoms described in the health records to identify the relevant ones. So that's one way the AI actually really contributes to diagnosing rare diseases. And diagnosing is nice, but you want, of course, to also be able to treat these rare diseases. And there, this is difficult because there are only so few people suffering from these rare diseases. So what you need is really a big amount of these patients. And this is one really amazing data pool that we have here at Centogene, more than 500,000 rare disease patients, which who have given their consent so that their genetic material and also the metabolomic material can be used for research purposes. And this we analyze to find patterns so that we can quicker distinguish between healthy and normal without running a very expensive genetic test. Maybe you can just take a blood sample and test for specific compounds in the blood for specific metabolites, which is way more inexpensive than doing the complete genetic analysis. Or maybe we can understand the disease better. What is if you have the genetic variant, what changes in the protein does it cause, what gets accumulated in the cells. So there again, we have so much data, so many genetic variants, so many metabolites in the blood that no person on his own can really resolve by hand. And we have built one AI tool, which I'm really particularly proud of. And this identifies biomarker candidates. So compounds in the blood that help to distinguish between healthy and disease. And previously, it took like 6 months to go through all these 17,000 compounds. And it was really a very boring job where you would look at graphics and click through. And then this took 6 months. And now with AI, it takes 2 minutes, where we identify a list of 20 biomarker candidates. And then the interesting work starts for the medical expert. Now we can look at these identified and to really the part where the medical knowledge that he has as a human is relevant. And this is one way I think AI really makes sense to remove standard monotonous tasks, routine tasks, and to enable the experts to focus on those things they really need their human expertise for.
Carsten, the really nice thing there is for anyone listening in, and even if they haven't got a background in AI, those numbers, 2 million genetic differences condensed down to 20. And then if we look at it on the biomarker, from 6 months to a couple of minutes, the applications and the time saved and the manual efforts just reduced, it's pretty phenomenal, the results that can actually come from that. And what we can sometimes forget about rare diseases is that when you think of the pharmaceutical companies, they're only going to be incentivized to work on solutions where there's a demand and the volume of people that need it can justify the amount of expenditure needed to bring a product to market. So for a lot of cases, people with rare diseases, they're in really challenging situations because it mightn't be an incentive for companies to actually go and work on these problems unless there's real a focus or an effort made to have it happen. When you look at the challenges of making new discoveries and you talk about some of the impacts that it can have, what's the journey of getting the data right, fit for purpose? How are you going to apply AI, from the programming aspect, and also making sure it's a success? Because it's not, I'm sure there's quite a bit going under the hood from some of the things that you've shared there.
Yeah, and there it's like the same answer as always. So 90% is really improving the data quality. And here in life science is particularly a big problem because we are talking about biological processes where if you take, for instance, the same blood sample and you measure it once with a mass spectrometer instrument, and you take the same one and you measure it 10 minutes later with the same instrument, you will get different values just because of the physical properties, nonlinear shifts between measurements, because these are so complicated devices handling with biological matter where it's not like 100% reproducible. So there, this data quality step, making sure you follow the highest standards in preparation, but and then even then you have to apply various methods for optimizing the data, for getting rid of instrument-specific differences, and so on and so forth. So this is my pure machine learning experts that I have in my group. Sometimes they come and complain, oh, we can't even do so much machine learning. We have to do all the data cleaning. Well, this is because we're building up the department now and we're really enabling Centogene. So we have now, we had before already high quality processes, which are now optimized for doing machine learning. And then you have this particular challenge that you have high dimensional data. So we have, I don't know, 2 million genetic differences, or you have 17,000 metabolites in the blood, but you only have 100 samples of a disease patient, or sometimes 10, or many, we only have one patient. No, many features, but only very few samples. So all the problems that come with high dimensional data. And nevertheless, it's possible. So as a field of AI, machine learning, it offers lots of methods that help you there. And you go quite far with these, but then you always end up somewhere where then the machine learning expertise of my team really is needed to go beyond the boundaries that are there and come up really with new methods to work on this very challenging data set. And then it's really rewarding if you suddenly discover new potential biomarkers. So for one disease, we had a few, and then my team really looked at that and they came up with an additional 20, which are now investigated. And this is then really the motivating part, where you see that all this work that you spent in preparation and so on and so forth, well, it's finally coming to a good end.
I think people can forget that 80 to 90% of the work of data scientists is cleaning data, tagging data, making sure it's fit for purpose, and a few percentage is actually there to building the models and putting them into, waving the magic. And there's a T-shirt I saw recently that said 80% of my time is tagging data and cleaning data, transforming data, and 20% of my time is spent complaining about tagging data, cleaning data, and transforming data. Because like if the data is wrong, it doesn't matter if you're Einstein, Homer Simpson with a better data set is probably going to do better work than you, because it's so, it's such a big part of it, and it isn't always the most fun to talk about that side of it, but there's huge benefits of getting into the mindset of, that you are the architect of making sure the foundation is really strong, and that comes from the mind, getting that data set correct and fit for purpose too. And when you talk about your sample sizes, there's a real incentive there, because if you don't do it to the highest level, somebody's life could be impacted from that. So it's not like you're selling an additional pair of socks on an e-commerce website or building out a recommendation engine. There's some real work there.
This was actually on my first day at Centogene, when I came to my workplace, there was a little postcard sitting there saying, we are not an IT company. Our goal is not to build great software. We are working with people's lives.
Yeah.
And I liked that so much, because it really reminded me, really, it's so easy to get lost in AI and the algorithms and so on. But then to be reminded again, no, what we are doing here, it has an impact, and we have to have the highest quality. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So tell us, what makes Centogene so special with respect to AI?
So one really significant aspect is the amount of data that we have. 500,000 patients that have given the consent to use their data and working on it, exploiting it. And I've now really understood the value of doing that. So before I came to Centogene, I was always thinking, I have to really be careful about my data, and I don't want to share it so much. But now I really realized, no, if it's there, it can be used for good. So that's one thing. So we really have this, for rare diseases, rare amount of data. We have this devoted team of management and all the others who are really aware of that. What we are handling here are people's lives. So it's the consensus here. And we have our medical experts with whom we work together, me, for instance, with the biomarker development team in particular. And these experts, they are also willing to share their knowledge and their problems, no? Because they hope that we resolve the problems. But it's really a very open minded environment where we sit together and work breaking the frontiers of what's there. So the metabolomic studies, for instance, if you look at literature, you see that people are able to compare batches coming from 2 different machines, or maybe from 8 different measurements. And we are now on almost 200. And this has never done before. So we are on the forefront, and what we are doing, it's really for the good. So I feel so happy here. It's such an amazing, fulfilling job. But I don't want to make even more advertisement for Centogene, but it's really it's how I feel. So I'm so privileged. But of course, there comes also a high responsibility, of which we are reminded also very often.
I think every day where you can make an impact and you can get out of bed in the morning knowing your work matters is a great day. And I think, when we set up all this, we were passionate about moving forward in the AI field and how that can actually positively impact people's lives. So it's great hearing stories like this and sharing it with the marketplace. Tell us else about how else you're using AI, maybe examples such as for COVID testing.
Yeah, this is also interesting. So in March, when the lockdown started, we started thinking about whether we shouldn't go into COVID testing, because we have different debates on that. But I personally agree with the thought that mass testing is one way to go back to some kind of normality. So you really have to think, how can you scale up mass testing to test everybody ideally? No? So because then you can stop the spread of the infection very early. So we started to go into COVID testing, and to set up a test center at Frankfurt Airport where people can get tested before and after their travel. Of course, you need high standard processes from the biological side, but you also need very sophisticated IT support. Otherwise, you cannot handle the amount of samples that are coming in. And there, we are also using AI. So it's not really rocket science. So we had to analyze questionnaires and QR codes or codes on incoming samples. And my team was able to build a first solution within a few days. So we hadn't to do any research. We just looked at what libraries are out there and we implemented them. And then we built a small prototype, which has now evolved into a product that's integrated into the labs in Frankfurt. And this is so nice. What I love about AI today, when I started, it was also difficult to really get some AI system up and running. And today you have all these libraries, all these tools out there. And within a few days, you can build something that really helps to scale up a business. And that's so great for AI. It's really so great time.
It's fantastic to get that application in something that the pandemic is impacting all of us around the world. And within a few days, your team were able to come up with something that could be applied. And
but my team, just to interrupt, so my team was one part of a very big effort at Centogene. So the whole IT department, the whole medical department, they all work together. So I contributed a little bit. So just to make clear.
Yeah, so the collaboration aspect is really nice to see, and when you look at it as well. So, Carsten, my final question for yourself: in what circumstances can AI show superhuman capabilities?
Yeah, this is really an interesting question. So I also teach about AI, and this is a question that always comes from the people there. So what about this artificial general intelligence? And from what I have seen in the field, I know there are other perspectives on that, but what I've always seen and what I'm still seeing, despite all the progress in deep learning and so on and so forth, we see superhuman performance if you can make the problem small enough. I personally think every problem that can be made small enough, reduced enough, so like playing chess or detecting things in images or speech recognition or finding mutations. If it's just small enough, you can use AI to really speed it up and bring superhuman performance. What I have not seen, and what I think we are still very, very far from that, I'm not really sure whether we will able to reach it, is to reach something like we human have or any other living system has, to really react very flexible with a large variety of problem-solving mechanisms to problems. So this really general intelligence that we see in living systems, that we see also in cells or in our organs, but also especially in us humans, this really general intelligence that I don't think we will see in an artificial intelligence.
Carsten, I could speak to you about this topic for about 10 days straight. It's an interesting one with a lot of different debates as well. You've been listening to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kelly, and we've been speaking to Carsten Ullrich, who's Director of Artificial Intelligence at Centogene. We were speaking about AI and how it can be used for rare diseases, some of the challenges and opportunities posed from that, improving diagnostics, and how we can actually leverage it for new discoveries. We also talked about how at Centogene they're supporting further applications such as COVID testing as well. Carsten, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's so great talking to you.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. For more information, contact mark@alldus.com. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.